Ave, you noticed how the world can change in silence, and only later the headlines try to catch up? A decision happens behind closed doors. A figure disappears from influence. A structure that seemed untouchable suddenly looks fragile. And for a moment, you can feel it. Something old is losing its grip. Not because people suddenly became brave. Not because the public finally understood everything. But because a transition is underway. This is not only political, not only economic, not only technological. It is planetary. The Earth is moving through an evolutionary passage, a shift in the kind of consciousness that can hold power, build society, and shape reality. And when that shift reaches a certain threshold, old systems don't fall because they are argued with. They fall because they can no longer remain coherent inside the new field. That is why events now feel different. The old structure does not break in a single dramatic moment. It starts to expose itself. Contradictions surface. Hidden alliances begin to fracture. Certain narratives lose their effect. And control starts to look like what it always was. Dependence on secrecy and fear. This is why the phrase in your title matters. The boldest move yet. Because there are moves that signal escalation. And there are moves that signal irreversibility. A move becomes the boldest when it crosses a line the old system cannot uncross. When it forces exposure. When it removes protection. When it collapses a structure by making it visible. That is the nature of what you are witnessing now. On the human level, you see the white hats. You see operations, removals, exposures, realignments. You see pieces moving in a way that doesn't match the public script. But it is important you understand the larger context. The white hats are not the source of the transition. They are a visible arm of it. This is where we enter the field with you. We are the Pleiadians. We speak to you not as distant observers, but as guardians of the emotional spiritual coherence of humanity during this passage. Our work is the inner layer, the stabilization of the human field so that truth can be received without collapse, so that change can unfold without mass fragmentation, so that the heart can remain coherent while structures fall. And we do not act alone. The Pleiadians and the other aligned star races working around Earth are part of a single coordinated project of planetary transition. Different races carry different functions, but the project is unified, and it is coordinated under the command of Commander Ashtar Sheran. That name is not presented here as religion, myth, or theater. It represents command structure, coherence across dimensions, supervision of timing, containment, and transition. And within this coordination, what is happening now has a clear meaning. Certain global leadership structures have already been contacted and aligned, not as publicity, as strategy. Some leaders are already participating in the transition, quietly shaping the shift from within the old system so the new system can emerge without total destabilization. That is why you see unexpected cooperation in places you never expected it. That is why you see removals that feel sudden. That is why you see exposure arriving in waves. But for a new world to be built, the old one cannot keep the same hands on the controls. Some leadership figures will be displaced. Some power centers will lose access. Some institutions will be restructured or dissolved. Not as vengeance, as alignment, because a new economy, a new social structure, a new cultural foundation cannot be carried by consciousness that depends on fear, domination, and distortion. A society capable of holding more evolved spirits, more integrated humans, requires leadership and systems that are compatible with maturity, transparency, and responsibility. So if you've been feeling that something bigger is moving, even when the news looks normal, you are not imagining it. The transition is not announced first. It is felt first. And you are feeling the field shift before the story is written. Stay with that. What often confuses people during a transition like this is that it doesn't look like revolution. It looks like reorganization. Old systems do not collapse all at once. They are slowly deprived of coherence. They lose legitimacy. They lose coordination. They lose the ability to hide their own contradictions. This is why the current moment feels unstable but not explosive. The field is changing first. And when the field changes, behavior follows. The Earth is not moving toward a new structure because someone decided it should. It is moving because the level of consciousness required to sustain the old structure is no longer dominant. Systems built on secrecy, fear, extraction, and psychological manipulation require a certain kind of human participation to survive. They require compliance. They require fragmentation. They require emotional instability. As more humans stabilize internally, those systems lose their foundation. This is why the transition cannot be understood only through politics or economics. It is evolutionary. A new economy cannot be built on scarcity when people are no longer internally governed by fear. A new social structure cannot be maintained through domination when people are no longer emotionally dependent on authority. A new culture cannot emerge if consciousness remains fragmented. So what you are seeing now is not the end of a world. It is the end of compatibility between an old system and a changing humanity. This is also why resistance intensifies, not because the transition is failing, but because misaligned structures cannot survive without pressure. They attempt to slow the process. They attempt to confuse perception. They attempt to create emotional noise. But none of that restores coherence. It only reveals where coherence is missing. This is why the actions now unfolding feel precise rather than chaotic. Moves are calculated. Timing is intentional. Exposure happens in layers. On the surface, it looks political. Underneath, it is structural. And beneath structure, it is spiritual. Because a planet does not transition only through laws and institutions. It transitions through consciousness thresholds. When a threshold is crossed, certain systems simply cannot remain. This is not collapse as punishment. It is collapse as natural consequence. And this understanding matters because it removes fear from the process. You are not watching the world fall apart. You are watching it reorganize around a higher level of coherence. That reorganization is not fast. It is not dramatic. It is not announced. It is steady. And as it continues, your role is not to react to every headline or disturbance. Your role is to remain stable enough to perceive what is actually changing. Because perception becomes clarity when the noise fades. And clarity is what allows you to move through this transition without being pulled into distortion. Stay present with this. The larger movement does not need urgency. It needs coherence. And coherence begins here. At this point, it is important to widen the lens. What is unfolding around Earth is not the work of a single group, a single race, or a single level of reality. It is a coordinated project. The Pleiadians do not act in isolation. Neither do the White Hats. Neither does any other aligned force working around this planet. There is a unified structure behind the transition. Arcturians are stabilizing the new energetic architecture of the planet. Syrian collectives are assisting in the reorganization of social and cultural systems. Andromedan forces are dismantling long-standing structures of domination and control. Lyran lineages are reactivating the original sovereignty embedded in the human spirit. The Essassani are preparing the conditions for future contact and integration. Each carries a specific function. None competes. None overrides the other. All operate within the same evolutionary framework. And this framework is coordinated under the command of Commander Ashtar Sheran. This command does not function through belief or symbolism. It functions through coherence, timing, and containment. It ensures that the transition unfolds without planetary collapse, without unnecessary suffering, and without destabilizing the human field beyond what it can integrate. This is why the current moment feels carefully paced. Exposures happen in waves. Power shifts occur quietly. Old structures are not attacked. They are outgrown and dismantled through loss of relevance. The white hats you see acting in the physical world are aligned executors within this larger command structure. They are not improvising. They are responding to a field that has already shifted. And this is where your position becomes relevant. Not as a spectator, not as a believer, as a conscious participant in the field. Alignment is not emotional. It is positional. So now take that position clearly. Go to the comments and write, "I align with the command of Commander Ashtar Sheran." This is not a statement of ideology. It is a declaration of coherence. It places your consciousness in resonance with the transition rather than in resistance to it. And when coherence increases, confusion loses ground. Remain here. The larger structure is already moving, and your alignment strengthens the stability of the field in which this transition continues to unfold. What is being exposed now was never meant to be seen all A. The old control did not survive by strength, by agreements that were never public, by influence that operated behind institutions. This is why exposure feels unsettling. Not because something new is appearing, but because something. When control depends on secrecy, visibility becomes destabilizing. And that is exactly what is happening. The boldest move executed by the white hats is not an act of confrontation. It is an act of removal of protection. Certain structures were allowed to operate because they were shielded, because consequences were delayed, because accountability was fragmented. That shielding is ending. You may notice this through sudden reversals. Figures once considered untouchable losing influence. Institutions contradicting themselves publicly. Decisions that no longer align with long-standing agendas. This is not chaos. This is exposure doing what exposure always does, forcing coherence or collapse. The old system cannot survive transparency because it was never built to function in truth. It was built to function in control. And control collapses when the field no longer responds to fear. This is why the exposure phase feels different from previous cycles. It is not fueled by outrage. It is not driven by reaction. It unfolds through loss of credibility. The narratives stop working. The pressure points fail. The emotional triggers no longer generate the same obedience. And as that happens, the system begins to turn on itself. Not intentionally, structurally. When coordination breaks down, mistakes surface. When secrecy weakens, contradictions multiply. When influence fragments, authority dissolves. This is what you are witnessing now. Not a battle between sides, but a system reaching the limits of its own design. And this is why removal becomes necessary. Some leadership structures cannot transition. They cannot adapt. They cannot operate within a field that demands transparency and responsibility. So they lose access, not through spectacle, through irrelevance. Their decisions stop shaping outcomes. Their influence no longer organizes the field. Their presence becomes noise rather than control. This is how power actually shifts, quietly, irreversibly. And this shift is not arbitrary. It is aligned with the larger planetary transition. A new society cannot be built on hidden influence. A new economy cannot be sustained by manipulation. A new culture cannot emerge while control remains invisible. Exposure is not the goal. Exposure is the mechanism. It clears the space where new structures can form. And as the old control becomes visible and loses coherence, the ground opens for something else to stabilize. Something that does not require secrecy to function. Something that does not depend on fear to maintain order. This is why the boldest move matters. Not because it destroys the old system, but because it makes continuation impossible. What is exposed can no longer rule from the shadows, and what can no longer rule from the shadows must either transform or step aside. That process is already underway, and it is unfolding exactly as it needs to. What makes this moment different from everything that came before is not the scale of exposure, and not the number of structures being touched. It is the state of the field in which this exposure is happening. There were other times when truth surfaced, other times when hidden power structures were challenged, other times when control cracked under pressure. But those moments did not complete the transition. They revealed fragments, and then the system reorganized itself. Why? Because the human field was not stable enough to hold truth without turning it into fear, outrage, or new dependency. Exposure without stability produces chaos. Chaos creates demand for control, and control returns wearing a different face. That cycle is no longer functional. The boldness of the current move lies in this. The human field has matured enough to sustain the consequences. Enough people are no longer looking for saviors. Enough people are no longer waiting for permission to think. Enough people are no longer emotionally governed by authority. This changes how exposure operates. Instead of triggering panic, it triggers withdrawal of consent. Instead of producing rebellion, it produces non-participation. Instead of fueling conflict, it dissolves legitimacy. And legitimacy, once lost, does not regenerate easily. This is why the move unfolding now is irreversible. The old system cannot simply hide again, because hiding requires belief, and belief is no longer automatic. Control once worked because people internalized it. They defended it emotionally. They reproduced it unconsciously. They identified with it. Now something quieter is happening. People are stepping back internally. They are observing without reacting. They are refusing to invest emotional energy in narratives that feel empty. This does not look dramatic, but it is devastating to systems built on attention and fear, because attention is currency, and fear is leverage. When both are withdrawn, the system loses its operating power. This is why the current phase feels less explosive and more final. There is less noise, but more consequence. Moves are made without announcement. Structures are removed without ceremony. Protections are withdrawn without explanation. Not to shock the public, but because shock is no longer necessary. The process has moved past persuasion. It has entered reconfiguration. And reconfiguration only happens when the next structure is already forming. Behind what you can see, new frameworks are being assembled. Not idealized ones, not perfect ones, but ones that can function in a field where transparency exists, where accountability is expected, where leadership is no longer propped up by fear. This is also why resistance now appears frantic. The old system does not sense attack. It senses obsolescence. It is no longer central to reality formation. And when a system loses centrality, it loses power, even before it collapses publicly. This is the most difficult position for any structure of control, because it cannot fight irrelevance. It cannot dominate a field that has moved on. So if this moment feels strangely calm despite its magnitude, that calm is not denial. It is readiness. The world is no longer bracing for impact. It is reorganizing direction. And once movement becomes directional rather than reactive, there is no return to the old cycle. That is why this move is the boldest yet. Not because it creates spectacle, but because it ends repetition. And when repetition ends, history does not loop, it advances. At this stage of the transition, something becomes very clear. This process does not move forward only through institutions, through leaders, or through operations carried out behind the scenes. It also moves through human positioning. A planetary transition cannot stabilize if the human field remains passive, fragmented, or waiting to be rescued. That is why this phase is not about observation anymore. It is about participation through coherence. Participation does not mean activism. It does not mean confrontation. It does not mean trying to control outcomes. It means holding position. The new structures forming on Earth require humans who can remain emotionally stable while systems reorganize, who can observe collapse without feeding panic, and who can act responsibly within their own sphere without reproducing old patterns of domination or fear. This is why your inner state matters now more than your opinions. Fear amplifies distortion. Reaction feeds chaos. Confusion strengthens old control. But coherence does something very different. Coherence stabilizes the field in which decisions land. It allows exposure to unfold without collective collapse. It creates the conditions for leadership to change without violent rupture. This is not symbolic. Human consciousness is part of the operating system of this planet. When enough individuals withdraw emotional energy from fear-based narratives and stand in clarity, the field reorganizes itself naturally. That reorganization is what allows the white hats to execute decisive moves without triggering mass destabilization. This is why the human role at this point is not optional. It is structural. The transition requires people who are willing to be present, grounded, and responsible, not just for themselves, but for the collective field they contribute to every day. This is a moment of alignment. Assume your position now. Go to the comments and write, "I integrate with the command of Commander Ashtar Sheran." This statement is not made toward any authority. It is made toward the field itself. It signals readiness to act with coherence, to support transition rather than resist it, and to contribute to stability as new structures take form. After this point, the process continues regardless. But alignment determines how it unfolds, and how it unfolds matters, because the quality of the transition defines the quality of what comes next. Remain steady. The field responds to coherence, and coherence, once established, becomes the quiet force that carries the transition forward. As the transition advances, one reality becomes impossible to ignore. Not everyone can move forward within what is being formed. And this is where many people misunderstand what they are witnessing. They assume that removal of power means punishment. That loss of position means failure. That displacement means injustice. But what is happening now is not moral judgment. It is structural incompatibility. The new systems emerging on Earth require a different internal architecture. Not better intentions, not louder promises, a different mode of consciousness. Leadership in the new structure cannot depend on fear, cannot rely on secrecy, cannot function through psychological domination, because the human field no longer sustains that frequency. For a long time, power was maintained through fragmentation. People were divided internally, emotionally destabilized, dependent on authority for meaning and safety. That phase is ending. As more humans stabilize internally, structures that depend on emotional dependency begin to fail. This is why certain leaders appear increasingly erratic, why decisions feel disconnected, why influence that once felt absolute suddenly weakens. It is not opposition that removes them. It is loss of compatibility. Some figures cannot adapt because control is not something they use. It is something they are built around. Their identity is fused with dominance. Their relevance depends on distortion. Their authority requires imbalance. Transparency does not empower them. It dissolves them. So they resist. They escalate rhetoric. They intensify division. They attempt to recreate fear. But fear no longer organizes reality the way it once did. The field has changed. And when the field changes, control mechanisms stop responding. This is why power is not being removed through spectacle. It is being removed through loss of access. Access to influence. Access to coordination. Access to protection. When access ends, authority becomes symbolic. Titles remain. Positions may still exist. But decisions no longer shape outcomes. This is how removal happens in a mature transition. Quietly, irreversibly. Not everyone is displaced. Some leaders adapt. Some realign. Some recognize the change and step into a different role. Others cannot. And those who cannot are not defeated. They are outgrown. This is essential to understand. A new economy cannot be built by minds trained to exploit scarcity. A new social structure cannot be sustained by personalities addicted to control. A new culture cannot emerge while leadership feeds on division. The future does not punish the past. It moves beyond it. And this movement is already reorganizing society. You may not see it clearly yet, because new structures form quietly. They do not announce themselves with noise. They stabilize before they reveal. What you are witnessing now is the clearing phase. Space is being created, not for chaos, but for coherence. And coherence does not negotiate with structures that cannot hold it. It simply reorganizes around what can. This is why the question of this phase is not who will win. It is what can remain, what can function without fear, what can lead without domination, what can organize society without manipulation. Those are the structures being selected now, not by ideology, not by popularity, by compatibility with the next stage of human evolution. This is not an ending, it is a filtration, and filtration is how life ensures continuity. The transition does not stop for those who resist it. It stabilizes around those who can hold it, and that is exactly what is happening now. After removal, there is always a pause, not a vacuum, not emptiness, a recalibration. This is the phase many people misread. They expect immediate replacement, new leaders announced, new systems declared, new rules written overnight. But transitions that last do not move that way. What comes next is alignment before construction. The old structure organized itself through pressure, through urgency, through constant reaction. The new structure organizes itself through coherence. That means fewer visible moves at first, less noise, more quiet coordination. This is where people often feel impatient. They mistake silence for delay. They mistake calm for inaction. But calm is not inactivity. Calm is stability returning to the field. When the old control loses access, the human field begins to breathe again. Decisions no longer need to be rushed to prevent collapse. Systems no longer need to overcorrect to maintain authority. This is when new frameworks can be tested without pressure. Not imposed, not enforced, allowed to form. And this is where the nature of the future becomes clear. The new economy does not emerge from punishment of wealth. It emerges from redesign of value. Value shifts from accumulation to contribution, from extraction to sustainability, from control to participation. The new social structure does not form through hierarchy alone. It forms through responsibility. People are valued not by obedience, but by reliability, not by compliance, but by coherence. The new culture does not celebrate dominance. It recognizes maturity, and maturity expresses itself quietly. You may already notice signs of this around you. Leadership that does not seek attention. Decisions that are made without spectacle. Initiatives that grow without heavy promotion. This is how the next phase stabilizes. Not through revolution, through replacement by function. What works remains. What cannot function fades. And as this happens, something important shifts in the human psyche. The need to fight diminishes. The urge to prove weakens. The addiction to conflict loosens. Because the field is no longer organized around threat. This is why the transition is survivable. It does not demand perfection. It does not require everyone to awaken at once. It only requires enough coherence to allow new structures to take root. And those roots are forming now, quietly, steadily. The absence of chaos does not mean nothing is happening. It means the system is learning how to function without fear. This is unfamiliar for a planet that has lived under pressure for so long. But unfamiliar does not mean unstable. It means new, and new things always begin in silence. Before they become visible, remain aware of this phase, not to monitor it, but to recognize it, because recognition stabilizes perception. And stable perception is what allows you to move through the transition without being pulled backward by noise. The future does not announce itself loudly. It arrives when the field is ready to hold it. At this stage of the transition, something becomes unmistakable. Observation is no longer enough. Understanding brought you clarity. Neutrality brought you stability. But now, the process asks for presence with direction. A planetary transition does not advance only through the removal of old structures. It advances through the activation of new points of coherence. Without those points, collapse would simply recycle itself into another form of control. This is why the command coordinating this transition does not operate through belief systems or emotional loyalty. It operates through conscious positioning. The Earth does not need followers. It needs participants who can hold responsibility without domination. This is the distinction many miss. Participation does not mean fighting a system. It does not mean proving awareness. It does not mean opposing others. It means becoming functionally useful to coherence. Useful by remaining grounded while others react. Useful by refusing to amplify fear. Useful by acting ethically when pressure invites distortion. Useful by stabilizing environments rather than destabilizing them. This is how planetary service actually works. Not through heroism, through reliability. The commando of Ashtar Sheran coordinates across levels to ensure that the transition unfolds without catastrophic collapse, not only of institutions, but of the human psyche. That coordination requires humans who can operate without emotional excess, who do not seek identity through conflict, and who understand that the future is built by those who can remain clear when uncertainty rises. This is why readiness matters now. Readiness is not excitement. It is not urgency. It is not expectation. Readiness is the capacity to act without needing validation, to choose coherence over reaction, to choose responsibility over spectacle, to choose contribution over commentary. Some will express this through leadership roles, others through systems, logistics, education, healing, or organization. Many will express it simply by being stable reference points in chaotic environments. All of this is service. All of this supports the transition. What no longer serves is waiting for permission, confirmation, or dramatic signs. The transition does not pause for certainty. It moves forward with those who are able to move without fear. So now take your position clearly. Go to the comments and write, "I am ready to serve consciously within the command of Ashtar Sheran." This is not a declaration of identity. It is a declaration of availability. Availability to act with integrity. Availability to support coherence. Availability to contribute where you are without needing control. From this point on, alignment is no longer abstract. It becomes practical. It informs how you speak, how you decide, how you respond under pressure, how you carry responsibility in a changing world. And this is how the transition stabilizes, not because everyone agrees, but because enough individuals are willing to stand correctly within it. The field responds to that stance. And once readiness is declared, action organizes itself naturally, around coherence rather than fear. Remain steady. You are not being asked to do more. You are being asked to be available. And availability at this stage is what moves history forward. After the exposure phase, something very different begins to take shape. Not celebration, not relief, not triumph. What follows is responsibility. When old control structures lose power, a vacuum does not automatically appear. What appears first is a demand for maturity. Systems that were once propped up by fear and secrecy no longer organize reality. But something has to take their place. And that something cannot be improvisation. This is where many transitions fail. People expect instant solutions. They expect new authorities to appear fully formed. They expect clarity without participation. But a planetary transition does not work that way. What is being built now is not a replacement of faces. It is a replacement of operating principles. Decision-making begins to shift from dominance to accountability. Coordination begins to replace coercion. Function begins to matter more than image. This phase is subtle, but it is decisive. Because rebuilding without fear requires something humanity has not practiced at scale for a very long time. Shared responsibility. Without an external enemy to unite against, people are invited to mature internally. Without a controlling authority to blame, individuals and communities must learn how to self-regulate, cooperate, and act ethically without constant enforcement. This is not easy. Old habits surface. Old reflexes attempt to return. Some try to recreate hierarchy simply because it feels familiar. But familiarity is no longer the measure. Compatibility is. Structures that can operate transparently begin to stabilize. Systems that reward reliability rather than dominance gain traction. Leadership that listens rather than commands quietly proves itself effective. This does not happen overnight. It happens through repeated choice. And this is where the human field continues to matter deeply. Every decision made without fear reinforces the new structure. Every action taken with clarity strengthens coherence. Every refusal to amplify distortion weakens the remnants of the old system. The transition after exposure is not dramatic. It is disciplinary. It requires patience, consistency, and the ability to tolerate uncertainty without falling back into control mechanisms. This is why not everyone feels comfortable during this phase. Some miss the clarity that came from opposition. Some miss the identity that came from resistance. Some feel unanchored without an authority to push against. But this discomfort is not failure. It is growth. A civilization moving beyond control must learn how to exist without constant pressure. It must learn how to choose coherence without being forced into it. That learning is happening now, quietly, unevenly, but steadily. And as this new mode of organization stabilizes, something important becomes visible. The future is not being imposed. It is being assembled by those capable of holding responsibility without needing dominance. This is the real work after exposure, not rebuilding the old system in a new costume, but allowing a fundamentally different way of organizing reality to take root. And that process is already underway. Whether it succeeds smoothly or painfully depends not on announcements or leaders, but on how much coherence the human field can sustain as the rebuilding continues. That is the phase you are living through now, not the end of an era, the discipline of beginning. As the rebuilding phase settles, a different kind of silence begins to appear. Not the silence of avoidance, not the silence of denial, the silence of integration. This is the moment many people overlook because nothing dramatic seems to be happening on the surface. There are fewer shocks, fewer revelations, fewer visible collapses. And yet, something essential is taking hold beneath everything. The human field is learning how to remain stable without pressure. For a long time, intensity was mistaken for movement. Conflict was mistaken for progress. Urgency was mistaken for importance. But the new phase does not grow through intensity. It grows through continuity. Continuity requires a nervous system that can remain regulated while uncertainty exists. It requires minds that can tolerate not knowing every answer immediately. It requires hearts that can stay open without becoming reactive. This is not a small shift. It represents a maturation of the species. In previous cycles, humanity depended on crisis to reorganize itself. Only when collapse was imminent did cooperation appear. Only when fear peaked did alignment temporarily emerge. That pattern is dissolving. Now, alignment is being learned without catastrophe. This is why neutrality feels so present at this stage. Not apathy, not detachment. Neutrality as inner balance. You may notice this in yourself. Old triggers do not activate the same way. News that once caused emotional spikes now passes through with less charge. Situations that would have demanded immediate reaction now invite observation first. This is not indifference. It is regulation. Regulation is what allows consciousness to stay present while reality reshapes itself. And this is essential because the structures being formed now will not survive if they are built on emotionally dysregulated participation. They require people who can hold responsibility without panic, authority without dominance, and influence without manipulation. This is where the deeper work happens. Not in protests, not in arguments, not in declarations, but in how individuals carry themselves inside change. How they speak when tension rises, how they decide when certainty is absent, how they act when no one is watching. These are the behaviors that define the new culture. The old world rewarded intensity, speed, and force. The emerging world rewards clarity, consistency, and restraint. This shift can feel uncomfortable. Some people interpret the absence of drama as emptiness. They search for stimulation. They provoke conflict to feel movement again. But movement is still happening. It is simply happening below the threshold of chaos. And that is a sign of success. The commando coordinating this transition understands that a planet cannot mature if it remains addicted to crisis. That is why the current phase is not accelerated unnecessarily. It is allowed to stabilize. Stability is not stagnation. It is preparation. Preparation for systems that can endure. Preparation for leadership that does not burn out. Preparation for a culture that does not collapse under its own emotions. This is why your internal state continues to matter deeply. You are not required to carry the weight of the world. You are not required to solve global problems, but you are required quietly to not destabilize the field further. Every moment of inner regulation supports the larger structure. Every refusal to amplify fear contributes to coherence. Every choice to remain grounded strengthens the collective nervous system. This is how civilizations actually transition, not through constant upheaval, but through sustained integration. And integration is what allows the future to arrive without destruction. You are living inside that integration now. It may not feel spectacular, but it is decisive, because once a species learns how to stabilize itself without crisis, it does not return to its old patterns. It moves forward, not dramatically, but irreversibly. And this is the ground from which the final ceiling becomes possible, not through force, but through consistency of coherence. Remain steady. The quiet you feel now is not absence. It is the sound of a new structure holding. There is nothing left to wait for, no confirmation to seek, no signal to interpret, no authority to convince. The transition is already in motion. What matters now is where you stand inside it. By this stage, the old control no longer organizes reality for you. Its narratives do not pull you. This pressure does not orient your decisions. What replaces it is not belief. It is position. Position is what allows the transition to complete without fragmentation. It is what turns change into evolution rather than chaos. The command coordinating this planetary passage does not require intensity. It does not require sacrifice. It does not require struggle. It requires availability. Availability to act with clarity. Availability to hold coherence when others destabilize. Availability to contribute to order without reproducing control. This is how service functions at an evolutionary level. Not through heroism, through reliability, not through confrontation, through presence, not through dominance, through responsibility. At this point, your alignment is not theoretical. It is practical. It influences how you speak, how you decide, how you respond under pressure, how you carry authority without needing to impose it. This is how a new civilization stabilizes, not by replacing one control structure with another, but by reorganizing around people who can hold power without abusing it. This is the quality the new Earth requires. And this is why the final act of this transmission is not emotional. It is declarative. Take your position now. Go to the comments and write, "I place my consciousness in service of Earth's transition under the command of Ashtar Sheran." This statement does not bind you. It does not limit you. It does not remove your autonomy. It clarifies your stance. From this point forward, the transition does not ask who you believe in. It responds to how you stand. And when enough individuals stand with coherence, the field reorganizes itself naturally. Old structures lose relevance. New structures gain stability. Leadership shifts without collapse. This is not an ending. It is a seal of maturity, a seal of responsibility, a seal of readiness. Remain where you are now. There is nothing else to do in this moment. The transition continues, and from this position, you move with it, clearly, calmly, and without resistance. This is how evolution completes itself, not through force, through alignment that no longer wavers.